NFL schedule release week is upon us. Monday, May 13th on the Pump Fake. Jared Bailey with you as always, joined by my friend covering the New England Patriots, Taylor Kyles. Good to see you, brother. How are you?
Good to see you, man. There were some heavy hitters in that intro, so I got a lot to live up to, but it's good to see you again, man. I'm excited to be on. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, the got some friends in high places. It's nice to have, but I appreciate you hopping on with me. I think that this is kind of the time of year now where we can start actually having conversations about like, okay, how are these teams going to perform? What is the overall outlook? And your team, the New England Patriots, have had quite the offseason, a little bit of a change in identity, if you will. Taking Drake Maye in the NFL draft. I'm not going to pretend to be a college football expert or anything by that nature. But everything that I've seen watching his stuff from January up until now, he was my favorite quarterback in the draft class. And it seems like they are trying to flip everything on its head from what they've been really for a long time. Going from Tom Brady, Mac Jones / Bailey Zappi now to a guy like Drake Maye, who isn't going to be afraid to chuck it. They also add Jalen Polk and Javon Baker in the draft, two guys who aren't afraid to go deep. Baker, especially, who's a deep threat in college. So I'm intrigued to see what that looks like, especially under new offensive coordinator Alex Van Pelt. What are your thoughts overall for this New England offense and what it could look like going forward?
I'm excited, man. When Alex Van Pelt was hired, I'll admit that I was expecting it to be somebody from the Shanahan and McVay tree because that kind of seemed like where they were leaning. I was literally doing a live show when he got hired, and it was like me and two other beat reporters, and we're like, I don't really know who this guy is. Because obviously, like Kevin Stefanski is the guy in Cleveland.
Right.
About Alex Van Pelt very often, but once I started doing some research, like he's a distant disciple of the Bill Walsh tree from Paul Hackett. He's a guy who's been in a lot of different systems. Then you actually watch the tape. There's a ton of diversity in Cleveland's scheme where you got a lot of trick plays, you got double moves, you got like a lot of things that make the offensive line and the quarterback's lives easier with the play action, a lot of run heavy stuff. It's like West Coast, but definitely more of an emphasis on the vertical passing game, which is really exciting as, a Patriots fan where last year they refused to throw downfield until Bailey Zappi ended up playing quarterback later in the season. And now I think they do have the pieces to really make the offense work in terms of their young talent. So in free agency, they didn't make a ton of splashes, but they did bring in Chuks Okorafor, who I think is probably going to be the starting left tackle from day one, unless Caden Wallace ends up getting the job. But either way, I think they'll be pretty solid there, better than where they were last year, where it was a bunch of guys who were really more career backups. Chuks has starting experience. Right. And then in terms of skill players, they got KJ Osborne, who's solid. I think he's honestly a guy who's more of a fringe player than people realize. He's on a one-year deal, had a bunch of money guaranteed, but considering the young talent they have, and, they also have young players who are already on the roster who could give some different kind of elements to the offense. So more of a role player and a great locker room guy. And then Antonio Gibson, who I thought was the most exciting addition, a guy with a lot of versatility. I think he's a better running back than he gets credit for, mostly because he was kind of put behind the scenes with some other guys there in Washington. But in terms of having that third down guy, the pass catching running back, Patriots haven't had that since James White and Brandon Bolden back in 2021. So you get that. And then, like you mentioned, the rookies, that's where the real meat of this is, where you got Drake Maye. You can open the playbook wide open. He can do QB run game stuff. He can make any kind of throw from any kind of platform. So that's really exciting. Still has some things he has to work on. So that's where Jacoby Brissett. Oh my God, a lot of Jacoby's in the way. Jacoby Brissett, the quarterback they signed who has experience in Van Pelt's offense, probably going to start the season for them. And then Javon Baker and Jalen Polk. I am just so excited for these guys, especially getting to grow up and learn with Drake Maye and kind of be at the same pace. I think that's going to be great for this offense. I think Baker and Polk are both guys who could at least contribute significantly from day one. I think one or both of those guys could end up being starters for you pretty early on. So I really think that, in New England, there's definitely a sense of optimism after what happened last season and just how putrid the offense was. And it was nice to see that the front office and the coaching staff, obviously a lot of new faces there as well, understood we cannot go another year with stagnant offense. We have to create a young foundation. I think they did a pretty good job.
Yeah, and in terms of the Van Pelt offense, they have the pieces now where they can do some of the gun run stuff or the gun play action stuff that worked in Cleveland. So anything that can help Drake Maye out whenever he does eventually become the starter, which I think that you and I can probably agree will happen at some point this season, even if Brissett starts off the season as a starter. But And a lot of the the cons that I've heard about Drake May is, oh, he's raw. That seems to be the go-to thing when talking about him. But look, man, Patrick Mahomes is also raw. Josh Allen was also raw. Lamar Jackson was raw. Like, all these dudes who are quote unquote raw coming into the league compared to the guys who are, polished products, quote unquote, like the Mac Jones and Tua Tagovailoas of the world, where Mac Jones, he's now the backup in Jacksonville, and Tua, we may have already seen the peak of with Miami. Like, give me the dude with a ton of raw talent that you just got to harness in a little bit over the guys who are like, okay, that's basically what they are. Work with it. And I think that with this system and with the talent that they've added around him, like, this is going to be a unit that is going to grow together. I don't know if it was you that I saw had said this or somebody else, but it was like the dude standing up in court meme where it's like, like with a hot topic, you're like, I think the Patriots can be a playoff contender. Was that you, or am I? Or am I?
That was me, guilty as charged. I phrased it very carefully, though, to make sure I kind of kept myself clean. But my whole thing is, like you mentioned with Drake, I think even more than the physical ability, obviously that's the part that really excites you. But I think he's also shown both the toughness and the intelligence to start at least like halfway through the season, or if he wins the battle out of camp. Yeah. I know people think, like with Mahomes and Lamar, where they did get an opportunity to sit for a long time. Then Jordan Love is the comparison everyone thinks of recently, because the Packers connection with Elliott Wolf and Aaron Rodgers and all that. But Drake, one, I don't think he's the kind of guy where he'll struggle early on and then kind of go inside himself. I think he's got a really good head on his shoulders in terms of being able to take hits. He was in an adverse situation last year in UNC and still made sure that was a competitive team, despite the fact they didn't have a ton of talent. Gerard Mayo and Elliott Wolf both touched on that. And then I also think that he's smart in terms of, like, he knows where pressure is coming from. He senses it really well. He knows how to attack different coverages. And when you see him throw, it's more like he's throwing to space rather than like predetermining a lot of the time, which is what you love to see, especially from a guy who's only started 2 seasons, is 21 years old. But yeah, I think if like 2 or 3 of their rookies end up becoming regular contributors, it means that they're going to have more juice on offense, which right now, if you only play the veterans, I think it's going to be like a solid passing attack. Jacoby's aggressive, so I think they will be more explosive than people realize. But if you get Baker, Polk, Maye, Jaheim Bell, any combination of those guys really starting for you pretty early on, I think the offense is going to be in the kind of place where they can be more aggressive and really start challenging defenses downfield and, again, really open up the playbook.
On the defensive side of the ball, take us through what to expect from New England defensively, because we know that Matt Judon's been good for a number of years now. Christian Gonzalez has a lot of expectations there, dealt with injuries last season, but some exciting names on that side of the ball. What are your overall expectations for them defensively?
So we spoke to Juwan Bentley, their captain and linebacker, a couple weeks ago, and he mentioned the defense is more evolving than it is really changing, because now DeMarcus Covington, used to be the defensive line coach, is running things on the defensive side, but he's been there for so long. The players are like, yeah, he could coach safeties if he wanted to. Like, he understands this defense. So will there be some drop off because Belichick isn't there? To some degree, for sure. You're talking about a guy who's literally seeing everything. So he can come up with, how many times did he pull up a game plan that we're just like, where the hell did that come from? Like, whether it's taken from the college ranks or something that he was doing in the 80s, that wealth of knowledge was so valuable for the Patriots, and just the little pointers he could give. But this is still a great coaching staff. Gerard Mayo has seen a lot of football, grew up under Bill Belichick, and was one of his smartest players, and a guy that they call Bill Jr. So when you have that, DeMarcus Covington, who I think is going to really put more of an emphasis on pass rush and turnovers, 2 areas where they struggled largely due to injury. I think the coaching staff, especially with the continuity, should really be pretty solid. Like, I don't think there's going to be a ton of drop off, just the obvious from losing a Hall of Fame coach. But then in terms of players, they didn't have any really big losses. Miles Bryant was the only guy they lost. And I think that's maybe more of a cultural change where we're seeing them try to get more explosive and faster, another area of emphasis for them. But Elliott Wolf said they wanted to retain their key players, and they did that. They signed Kyle Duggar to a 4-year deal. Now you got a nice trio there with him, Jabril Peppers, who I thought was like borderline Pro Bowl caliber player last season, made a ton of plays despite the fact he was mostly a free safety, where, it's really hard to make plays from that role just because you're not really getting the ball thrown to you very often. You got to be smart. You got to be rangy, and he showed that. And Marte Mapu was a guy who I loved. I think as a prospect, he's got so much talent and intelligence, but it was a learning curve. He came from Sacramento State, so I think he's going to make a jump. And if you see jumps from him, Christian Gonzalez, who was excellent in the first few games of the season before he went down for the season with a shoulder injury. And Keon White, another guy with a ton of talent, just there's a big jump in terms of the competition that they're going to face. If those guys take a step forward, I think you're going to see this continue to be the kind of top unit it was last season. And then obviously Judon coming back off injury. They added Marcellus Dial, who's their only defensive player added. I think he adds good competition at cornerback. You got Gonzo and Jonathan Jones likely the starters. Then you got Marcus Jones, is probably a slot guy, but they've used him outside as well. Really athletic. Isaiah Bolden, height, weight, speed kind of guy who Deion Sanders loved when he was at Georgia State. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of talent at the cornerback position where they could maybe just figure out who's the most talented guy that they can get onto the field. And then the linebackers, I think, are super underrated. Juwan Bentley, old school thumper, but also knows his limitations and does a good job covering for those in terms of like getting to his spots and taking good angles and making tackles in space. And Jelani Tavai is one of the most versatile and impactful linebackers who doesn't really get a ton of credit, and Sione Takitaki, who they added as well. So there's a lot of versatility and talent on this defense. I didn't even mention Christian Barmore. Didn't even get there, but they extended him. I think you could argue he's the best player on the entire team, to be honest. He was a game wrecker despite the fact that he's not really a penetrator. They use him more as a gap control guy, and really there's a lot of discipline that you need to be in New England's front. And he showed that he had that and could still dominate. So this is a unit that I'm expecting to continue to be top 10 at the very least. And that's kind of the big reason I think the Patriots could make a playoff push, because last season they got blown out twice, but every other game they were competitive. The offense was just kind of actively working against them. So I think if the offense is average to below average, but not terrible, this is a team that could pull out some sneaky wins that I don't think people would really expect.
Yeah, I think there was a stretch last season where a 3 or 4 game stretch where they allowed 13 or fewer points and they only won one of those games. So the offense was no, as a Steelers fan, like I totally relate to the offensive woes for sure. Like I think that there's a lot of parallels right now with Pittsburgh and New England in terms of, starting over somewhat, maybe a soft reload, if you will. So I'm intrigued by New England, which is something that I haven't been able to say for the past few years, where they've just been like the most boring team in football in terms of, all right, you turn on the Patriots game, you know what's going to happen. They'll throw an office party if they score 2 touchdowns. It's going to be difficult for the defense to keep pitching shutouts the way that they've been doing in terms of, just having to lean on their defense so much was not fun football to watch. And I can, again, relate to it as a Steelers fan, but, we'll move on to the Buffalo Bills, who have won this division each of the last, 4 seasons. They let go of some notable names this offseason. A lot of people were initially freaking out about, the losses of Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, Tre'Davious White, Mitch Morse, a lot of veteran guys who, dragged the team out from the playoff drought and were part of, this renaissance in Buffalo. But when it comes down to it, they still have Matt Milano in the middle of the defense, still have a couple really nice corners in Roswell Douglas and Christian Benford. Terrell Bernard as well next to Milano. Like, they dealt with a lot of injuries last year on that side of the ball, and eventually it finally cost them, especially against Kansas City in the divisional round. And when you got 17 under center, man, I just can't count you out. So I still like Buffalo. If I had to pick right now, that would still be my pick to win the division. Again, as long as you have that cyborg at quarterback who just finds ways to get things done, man, like I'm not going to bet against Buffalo until proven otherwise.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. That's why I was glad the Patriots got Drake Maye, where it's like at least they have a guy where down the road you have that sense of calm where you go into a game and you're like, all right, at least this guy is talented enough where as long as it doesn't get out of hand, he can make that one play.
Right.
Really the momentum. So, I've had to talk about the AFC East rankings and everything like that. If Josh Allen weren't on the Bills, I think they'd probably be last in the division, to be totally
I would agree. Yep.
The roster, it really isn't, it doesn't really move me. I like James Cook. I like Dalton Kincaid. I like a couple of their offensive linemen. But I think they're just okay, really. And even the defense, I think, is like solid, but not something that really scares you like they did when this team was really in their prime. But like you said, Josh Allen, man, you can't count him out. Obviously, you saw more evil Josh Allen than I think Buffalo fans wanted last season. I did like the addition of Keon Coleman. I'm wary of how they're going to use him because I think he's a guy that you want to move around to maximize his talent rather than just say, hey, you're Stephon Diggs, we're putting you at X.
I think that he'll very much be boundary and slot versatile a lot next year.
Yeah. Exactly. So, and just the fact that he's a ball winner, I think that's a good fit for Josh Allen. Where like separators are great, but with Josh, when things break down, you really want someone where you can just kind of put it in their area code and they can make a play on it. So I think he's a good fit there. Complimentary for Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, even Mac Hollins. I don't know if I'm the only person on the planet. I'm like a pretty solid Mac Hollins supporter.
Yeah, I think you might be the only one on the planet who's a big Mac Hollins truther.
I think he's solid. I remember I was watching him last year when the Patriots, I was just trying to find like some kind of depth X guys. And understand, I only mean this is the depth player. I'm not saying like this guy should be a starter, but I think he's kind of fun. So, and then really that offense is going to run through their tight ends, I feel like, at the end of the day anyway. So you really got like a lot of big slot types, which is kind of redundant. They don't have a ton of guys who really scare you on the outside, but still at the end of the day, it's Josh Allen. And then if they get that run game going with James Cook, Ray Davis, I really like that kind of thunder and lightning sort of connection there. But yeah, if it weren't for Josh Allen, I wouldn't be terribly afraid of the Bills, but you have to respect, the alien on the other side of the field.
Absolutely. And I said something about this after the Patriots drafted Drake Maye. Is like, if he comes close to his potential, Josh Allen and Drake Maye for the next 10 years, twice a year, will be very, very fun. And I really hope that we get that because we deserve that. And what's another great quarterback in the AFC? They already have so many. So that would be very fun. I do think, this is something that Bills fans talk about a lot, is when is enough going to be enough when it comes to the Sean McDermott stuff? Like, how far do the Bills have to go this year in order for Sean McDermott to not, be completely on the hot seat or let go altogether? I think that there's a lot more job security there than people tend to realize. We talk about Mike Tomlin's job security and everything of that. I would probably put Sean McDermott near that conversation of guys who are just probably not going anywhere unless something drastic happens. But if there's another like divisional round loss to Cincinnati or Kansas City, like the question really needs to be asked, especially if Ben Johnson's going to be a name that is looked at next year as a potential head coach. Mike Vrabel will be back in the coaching carousel things. Like if you can eventually, at some point, it just feels like you're banging your head against a wall expecting a different result if they just keep doing this thing over and over again.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing is, their defense is ever bad. And McDermott is really a defensive guy. So I think that's a big reason. And then when you have Josh Allen, it's like, all right, you're doing your end, you're holding up your end of the bargain. And that's why they're cycling through offensive coordinators like this, where it's like, it's not Sean McDermott's fault. The defense is all right. It's, we got to get this offense figured out. I do think, obviously, they need to be a playoff team. Anytime you have Josh Allen, there's really no excuses in that vein. But I do wonder what it's going to take. I think if it is a one and done kind of situation, that's where you start really thinking this guy is on the hot seat.
Yeah.
If it's a loss in the AFC Championship game, I think that may be the big warning where it's like, dude, enough. We're going to give you one more year. We'll try to go all out in free agency with our draft picks, make sure we give you the tools you need. And this has to be the year. But if it's a one and done, I don't see how you justify keeping him because you just did this whole reset. And obviously there's going to be growing pains. And I think if they are competitive and you can see, all right, they just got young players, the talent's not great, but everyone else is doing as much as they can. I think there may be some leeway there. Yeah. But again, it's just this just feels like rinse and repeat over and over again where, I don't really want to put it on Josh Allen because I think, especially in the past few years, he's done pretty much everything he can do. There's been mistakes, but at the end of the day, you need a team to win in the playoffs. So again, it's going to be interesting, but I do think that if they don't make the Super Bowl this year, one way or another, McDermott's seat is going to get pretty spicy.
Yeah. And the defense has been good in the regular season. And, even in the game against Pittsburgh, that game never felt in doubt in the wild card round. The Steelers made a little bit of a comeback, but that more so just felt like the Bills just kind of playing with their food. And at some point, okay, let's score another touchdown and get out of here. But, against Kansas City, if not for, Mecole Hardman fumbling on the one, the Chiefs score on, I think, every possession that they had, minus one where they had to punt. So they were just up and down on the Bills all game long. And a few years ago against Cincinnati, they couldn't get to Joe Burrow with a bunch of backup linemen for the Bengals. Meanwhile, Josh Allen was under duress all day. So the defense needs to make a big statement in the playoffs this season. I think that would be very good for Sean McDermott's job security. But I do agree that especially if it's a one and done, man, if you're a wild card team again and you get bounced by, say, I don't know, if Indianapolis sneaks in and beats you, that's hard, man. So we shall see. Speaking of one and dones, the Miami Dolphins, one and done the past 2 seasons. I don't know, man. I think we've kind of seen the peak. I admire the
Not
commitment.
moved by Odell Beckham. You don't think he's going to get
dude, did you see the graphic that ESPN put out? I was like, oh, each of the past 3 seasons, Odell Beckham's completed. He's at 450 receiving yards. Is he going to do that this year? Like, we're really doing this where we give pats on the back for 450 yards receiving? That's what we're doing now?
For a guy like OBJ too, that feels more like a backhanded compliment than anything else.
Man, and I've gone on plenty of Odell Beckham rants over the past year, so I'm not going to do it again. But there's a reason why I say over the past decade he's been the most overrated player in the NFL. Like, I'm tired of the Odell Beckham discourse. But I think we've kind of seen the peak of this. Like, I admire the commitment to the bit of, like, we're just going to draft fast guys, we're going to sign fast guys, we're just going to be a track team on turf. Try to catch us. That's fun, man. You can do that when you're playing in South Beach in September, but going up to Arrowhead in January, have fun. We saw how that works. So I think that they'll probably be fun to watch in the regular season. But again, I think the Bills will win the division. So at best, that puts them at, the 5 or 6 seed. And if you got to go up north to Cincinnati in January, or Baltimore, or back to Arrowhead, to Buffalo, like, you're gonna have to go through some cold. And like, historically, they aren't good at doing that. So I'm not moved by the Miami Dolphins. I think that we've seen the peak of Tua Tagovailoa there. Like, the numbers, yes, they look gaudy, but I think we can all agree that this is it's similar to the Brock Purdy situation, where, okay, system that certainly helps him and really caters to what he does well. And if you ask him to create, you're really in trouble because he's not, a creator out of the pocket. I don't know, man. The Dolphins don't move me. They've had a lot of defensive losses this offseason as well. I think that they'll be in the hunt for a wild card spot, but it wouldn't shock me if, like, the bottom just kind of falls out this year and then they're playing the Dak Prescott bidding game next offseason.
Yeah, man. The first couple weeks last season, I thought we were seeing more of, like, Tua operating out of structure. I do think he's added some element to his game where, like, the first few years, literally, if he was on the run or out of the pocket, nothing was happening. Not even an exaggeration. Like, you could basically say, all right, win for the defense. He had to move.
Mm-hmm.
Last year, I thought you saw a little bit more of that creativity. But at the end of the day, I like Tua. But his limitations are kind of deal breakers when you're going up against really good teams. Like, the arm strength. Every single year, even when he got Tyreek Hill, like, can he make some really impressive downfield throws? For sure. But you also see, at least once a game, there's that floater.
There's that pop to center field.
Exactly. Where it's like, if there's a decent safety back there, it's probably going to be a turnover. And that's just who he is at this point. Like, we've seen it so much. You can't really expect anything different. And then there's the whole, like, anticipatory throw thing where I think with most quarterbacks, you don't really see how it goes poorly. Like, usually you see it and it's like, oh, you hit the window and, this guy wasn't even ready. And Tua definitely has some of those eye-popping moments of that where a defender will have no idea the ball's coming towards him because Tua's, like, looking this way and throwing that way. And all that stuff's cool when it works. But then it doesn't. And it's, like, horrible interceptions, just like Tua. Look at the coverage, man. I see you're looking right at the linebacker and you threw it to him. Like, you've been in the NFL for too long to be doing this. Those kinds of things happen in every single game. And when it's literally just like one play could be the difference maker in those tight matchups, then you're kind of screwed. Jalen Waddle, I think, is a really good player, but as someone who the Patriots play him twice a year, honestly, the only time he really kills them is when they make, like, a bad mistake. Like, Kyle Duggar misses a tackle in space, or, like, somebody gets picked and he's wide open. It's not really like Tyreek, where it's this guy can win any route and legitimately every single play is scary with him on the field. With Jalen, I feel like it's as long as everything's pretty structurally sound, he'll have a couple big plays, but he's not a guy that I'm ever afraid is going to take over. And Tyreek Hill's not going to be on the team for much longer. Raheem Mostert, similar kind of thing where he scares you. He's a legitimate weapon, very versatile, like home run threat anytime he touches the ball, also at the end of his career. So I think you're right. I think this is kind of the year where you're going to see, can they get over the hump? And I really don't know if they can because of what their quarterback situation is. I like that they got Patrick Paul because Teron Armstead, obviously an excellent player, not being available is really hurt, especially with Tua, who needs protection to, be the best version of himself. So, yeah, honestly, looking at the landscape of the AFC East, last year was really exciting. It felt like it really was living up to, like, the AFC Beast kind of moniker.
Sure.
This year, I don't see that. I think there are good teams, but the ones who I think can make a playoff push, like the Bills and the Jets, I think that there's still kind of issues where you're like, all right, yeah, but if one thing goes wrong, it kind of feels like that's gonna go to the wayside. And the Dolphins, I'm just like you, I'm not sold. I don't think they're a team that's ever gonna make it to an AFC championship game. And if they do, I don't see them being terribly competitive.
No, I completely agree. If they do, I think it's a situation like Tennessee a few years ago where like, yeah, you made it, but man, no one expects you to do much. It's pretty insane that you got here in the first place. So well, we shall see. And the thing with their offense too, like if you can live in too high against the Dolphins, mission accomplished, because they're going to try to run it down your throat and make you stack the box against Mostert and Achien, and now they just added Jalen Wright. Like again, I applaud the commitment to the bit of fast guy, come to South Beach. We'll have you. So I applaud that much, man. But again, that can only get you so far. You know, when you're running on, 75-degree sun, it's very much different than, running in -2-degree cold. So I do think that there are limitations with that. You brought up the Jets. That's the final team we got to touch on. And obviously, yeah, big question mark. Is Aaron Rodgers going to be good? And can he stay healthy? I love the moves that they made this offseason in terms of, all right, offensive line was putrid. They got some offensive line pieces. They drafted Olufashanu, brought in Morgan Moses, I believe. And we know how good the defense is. It's been very good for the past couple seasons. It's just been let down because their quarterbacks have been Zach Wilson and Tim Boyle. And Mike White for like 3 weeks, and everybody thought that Mike White was the second coming. So if Rodgers is healthy and is even like 80% of his former self, they should be a playoff team. But yeah, that is the big question here is what is Aaron Rodgers going to look like?
Dude, I got so much crap when Tyron Smith signed because Patriots fans were convinced that he might come to New England. I'm like, this dude is probably trying to win a ring. Like he's made a lot of money. He's had a great career. He's on the trajectory where it's like, give me a ring and I'm done. Like call it a career. And then when I said, oh, of course he signed with a contender, I got so much hate being like, oh, it's just the Jets. It's like, what were we doing this time last season?
Right.
Or when Aaron Rodgers comes and everyone's like, oh, Super Bowl contender. Like it's done. Pack your bags. It's like, I get that. And I respected that at least like the fact that they were going to be a team that made a push with Aaron Rodgers. Like, yeah, that's totally fair. They didn't really have any significant losses. If anything, they brought in guys. They got Tyron Smith. They got Morgan Moses, John Simpson. These are guys who were on playoff teams last season, really good offensive linemen. But then the issue is that Mike Williams, I think, is a solid addition. Malachi Corley. Yeah. I'm not as high on him as a lot of people are, but I still think he's a solid guy. And if he's a number 3 for you, I think you're in pretty good shape. Now, that said, this is kind of like a retirement home for players who used to be really good. Where it's like Tyron Smith and Mike Williams and Aaron Rodgers, yeah, they were like awesome. Like 5 years.
If this is 2018, this team is really dangerous.
Exactly. And I'm not even saying they're bad players or anything. Like I think Mike Williams can still give you what he's always given you. I think Tyron Smith can still play at a high level. Same with Aaron Rodgers. But if any of those guys get hurt, that's a significant wrench in your offense. Now, obviously, getting Olufashanu was huge. I think that's really what you needed to make sure that if Tyron Smith doesn't work out, you at least have some depth there with a great player. He might even start on the right side over Morgan Moses. Like, who knows? Yeah. I think they did a really good job at least adding pieces to the offensive line where they have a better chance of being healthy and staying consistent, which has been the biggest issue with the Jets. Like, the quarterback situation's always been bad, but the offensive line has never been helpful. It's like even when they had decent weapons, the offensive line was falling apart. And that defense, they're always going to be competitive, just a monster unit. We saw even when everything was going bad and there was some dissension, like people were kind of comparing the Patriots and Jets situations last year where the Patriots were like their defense was doing everything they could to win games. The worst you ever heard out of that locker room was I think Adrian Phillips once said like, oh, we got to pitch shutouts. That's what it is. And even from him, that was like, whoa. From Adrian Phillips, like, damn, okay. The Jets were having full-on mutinies, and like they were both bad behind the scenes. But the Jets, it was getting leaked during the season. At least the Patriots, it was kind of towards the end where once things got really, really bad, and it was kind of clear Bill was going to leave. That's when you started to hear that there was some negative stuff on the inside. But I kind of went off on a tangent there. But my point was the defense was excellent throughout that. Like there were, some spotty moments, of course, just based on how their season was going. But that unit's going to keep them competitive. So if their offense can stay healthy, specifically Aaron Rodgers, if you do lose Tyron Smith or Mike Williams, that stinks, and I think it will have an impact. But as long as you have Rodgers with Garrett Wilson, Malachi Corley, whoever you want to throw in after that, their receiving core isn't fantastic or anything, but I think he does elevate the team enough. And if Breece Hall's healthy back there and the offensive line is as good as you want it to be, it doesn't have to be the Aaron Rodgers show, and that's ideal. So if we're talking, everybody stays healthy and reaches their potential, I think the Jets are the number one team in the AFC East. But I can't bet on that when you have Josh Allen in the same division and it's just the Jets, man. Like I can't bet on the Jets knowing that they are who they are. Until you show me otherwise, I just can't put stock in you like that. But I do think at this point, they're probably, I would say, like the second best team in the AFC East, mostly because I think Rodgers is better than Tua.
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree with that. And if everything goes to, I think similar spots for the Patriots and Jets where, they don't need their quarterbacks or their offenses to be, elite top 5 units quarterbacks in the NFL. Like if they're just fine, then that's a ginormous upgrade from what it was a year ago for both sides, where, you had Zach Wilson just throwing to Patriot safety 6 times a game, twice a year. And you just couldn't do anything offensively. They played on Black Friday, and there was 100-some yard pick six before halftime. Like that pretty much was their season in a nutshell for the Jets. It's like, oh my God, like they just can't do anything. Similar for the Patriots, where all right, Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi are both really bad. Like if Maye and Brissett are combined like the 19th best quarterback in football, mission accomplished. That's cool. It's a good year one of this. So I think even with Rodgers, like if he's the 13th best quarterback in football this season, hey, you're on a good track to be a playoff team. If everything else lives up to its potential, then you're chilling. And I am a little bit more intrigued with the Jets just because you brought up Breece Hall. If he is back to looking like Breece Hall, then that's a really fun offense, man. I like Malachi Corley. I think they overpaid for Mike Williams, but I think that they could afford to do so right now, and they're trying to go all in and wanted that deep threat with Garrett Wilson kind of being the intermediate and underneath guy. Completely get that. But they do intrigue me, which is the more than I've been able to say about the AFC East as of late, which has been all right. The Bills, maybe the Dolphins, and then the Jets and Patriots can duke it out to see who's worse. More than likely the Jets because it's the Jets facing Bill Belichick. I know who I'm gonna pick. But at least all 4 teams have something interesting about them coming into the season, which we haven't been able to say for quite some time.
Yep, agreed. And like I said, I thought last year was just more compelling because it was Rodgers pre-injury. And, the Bills still had Stephon Diggs where you're like, yeah, that combination, you're never really counting them out. I think the Dolphins defense, I was really excited to see what Fangio was going to do with that system. Obviously, that didn't work out, but I am confident it's a good unit. Like Jordan Brooks, I love. And then Xavier Howard, I don't think that's a huge loss. I think he was
not good last year. They were very willing to be like, all right, Xavier, we're just going to cut you in February. We don't want any part of this anymore.
Yeah, Jalen Ramsey, it seems like people think that he's some scrub. He's still a dude. So I think him as your top dog in the secondary is still pretty good. So, and then again, the Patriots, I think last year it wasn't really copium. I just thought that the offense was good enough to complement the defense, and that was where the excitement from my end came from. But I also understood from an outside perspective, it's like this is an offense with Juju Smith-Schuster, Mac Jones, and Devontae Parker. Like, what are you talking about? Where is the optimism coming from? And I understood that perspective. I was just like, hey, they don't need to be like a top 15 offense. Literally just be okay, and you'll be fine. And they were obviously putrid. Like, they and the Panthers are the lowest scoring offense in the league. But, yeah, this is definitely a more intriguing year, although I would say I think it has more potential to be just kind of ugly for more of these teams. And I would say I was expecting going into last year where it seemed like guys were really loading up and, ready to go on some runs.
Yeah, Juju Smith-Schuster, New England. Chase Claypool's now with the Bills after being with the Dolphins for about 10 minutes. Yeah, this is where, washed Steelers receivers go to die, apparently, is the AFC East. So in terms of your overall thoughts, if you had to pick how the division was going to fall out, and obviously, we get the schedule release on Wednesday. A lot of releases are going to happen before Wednesday, of course. So we're going to kind of get a rough estimate of how, what order these teams are going to play their games. But if you had to 1 through 4, give me a May 13th prediction on what the AFC East will end up looking like, what would it be?
I'll go Bills 1. Again, just can't count out Josh Allen. 2 is the Jets. That defense is fantastic. And again, if Rodgers can, play behind a great run game and just do his thing when they need him to, I think that'll work out well for them. The Dolphins, man, they're so talented, but I really can't. Tua doesn't scare me, even though he's undefeated against the Pats as a starter. It's like all those games have been so close and just so ugly that he didn't really need to do much other than just finish the game. So yeah, I got to put them third. And then Pats, fourth until proven otherwise. As optimistic as I am for their chances of really competing this year, I think we got to see it on the field. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
That's fine. I think I'm in the same exact boat in terms of the order. I would love nothing more than to see the Patriots finish, second or third above the Dolphins. It's fun. It's nice that the Patriots are fun to root for now. Like it just feels like a new day. Bill's doing ESPN stuff. Gerard Mayo coming in. Drake Maye. I love Drake. So I hope that they're fun and good. Mostly because like a lot of Dolphins fans on Twitter don't like me, and it would be just great to rub that in. I don't know. Were you part of the was it last Thanksgiving? It might have been last Thanksgiving. The Dolphins hater like NCAA style tournament.
I was not. No.
I was, and I was very surprised that was a thing that somebody was taking out of their day to do, especially on Thanksgiving of all days. So it
was like a bracket with all the people that hit.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Maybe I was. Maybe I wasn't. I just don't know. But that's kind of funny.
Yeah. I admire the brain power to just be like, yeah, I'm doing this. Everybody's gonna know about it. I was eliminated in the second round by Mina Kimes. If anybody was curious,
you got to lose to anybody.
Sure. Yeah. You might as well lose to one of the best. Which people have got very used to over 20 years listening to Tom Brady. Hopefully Drake Maye can turn into somebody that I grow to hate because he's so good. Let's hope so. Taylor Kyle's always good doing that. I'm glad that we were able to do this, man. We need to do this more often.
Yeah, no, I got to get you on my pod too. Sooner than later, hopefully. Whenever we'll talk about it off camera, but we got.
Yeah. Give me a date and time, and I'm yours. What have you got coming work wise?
Yeah, so I'm over at Patriots Daily on YouTube, Patriots Press Passes, the channel. I have a pod pretty much every day during the week. I love to have guests on. So, again, you're more than welcome. Today, I got a mailbag with Tommy Curran of NBC Sports Boston. That's going to be a ton of fun. At least once a week, I've been trying to do film rooms on Patriots draft picks. I've done Drake Maye. I've done Javon Baker. This week, I'm going to be writing about Jalen Polk and why he can be a really versatile weapon for the Patriots. That's going to be a good time. And then next week, I'll have OTAs covered. So plenty of content in that space. But and then you can just check out my Twitter at tkyles39 if you like film clips. That's pretty much all the value I bring to the beat.
Well, gotta love it. In terms of me, if you're only watching the Pump Fake this week, Black and Gold Breakdown Steelers show every Monday through Friday around 7:30 p.m. Steelers stuff. OTAs are going to be soon. Mini camp will be soon, so I'll be on hand for at least one day of both of those, and then I'll give you my written and verbal thoughts both on the channel and then at Behind the Steel Curtain. USA Today wise, covering the schedule leaks and what all comes out. So I'm going to do some sort of piece on the schedule, maybe just some like 10 interesting nuggets on certain matchups. Something from me will come on USA Today after the schedule releases. And then predicting every game from every team. So like it's my favorite thing to do. I love it. It's so fun.
You're sick, but I respect it.
Yeah. So I do 2 of them a year. I do it the night of the schedule release, and then it usually comes out the next morning, and then the week of week 1. So like the Wednesday before week 1, I release like my final iteration of it. So yeah, look out for the every game, every prediction. That'll be just the standings, not giving you a score for every game. That would be borderline sociopathic, but go game by game for every team and tell you how I see it coming out. So that'll be coming this week everywhere. I'll talk about it on here too. But Taylor, I appreciate you, buddy. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Listen to wherever you get your podcast, like the channel, do all that YouTube stuff. See you later on the Pump Fake.